Welcome back. I'm Shane, this is Relative Time, and today we're going to talk about the Aragon Millipede Evo GMT. A mouthful, but a pretty cool, unique looking watch. Now, last year Seiko introduced their new Seiko 5 GMT lineup. And while most people loved them, personally I really wasn't interested in the watches themselves as much as the movement that was powering them. Because I knew it was only a matter of time before that movement would make its way to other brands, allowing a number of brands to create an entire new generation of affordable automatic GMTs, finally breaking the hold the Swiss had on automatic GMTs. And so far, out of all the new GMTs I've seen, this Aragon is by far the most original, which is kind of what you expect when you're talking about Aragon. Now, before I jump into this one, I do need to point out that Aragon provided this watch and they're not asking for it back. And that's why the promotional tag was up at the beginning. But with that said, let's move on to the specs. As far as Aragon watches go, this one is on the smaller side, but not by much. And it's still more of a mid-sized watch in the grand scheme of things. So here you're looking at a 44mm wide case without, and just under 48mm with the crown, whereas lug to lug is just over 49. Usually I prefer a 48, so this is a little long for me, but not by much. Total thickness is 14.5mm, so it is a bit tall, but in perspective, it's only a millimeter taller than that original Seiko GMT. And as you might expect with this case, it does come in with a pretty solid weight of 180 grams. And that is on its bracelet, give or take a link or two. Rounding everything out, it also has a 22mm lug width, 200 meters of water resistance with a screwed down crown, as well as a flat sapphire crystal. Aragon watches in general have a real solid, modern industrial feel to them. And this watch is no exception to that. Especially with this tank tread or chain style bracelet. Not exactly sure what you want to call this one, other than just calling it cool. In some ways, there is a bit of a clash here between the watch head and the bracelet, as the watch head itself is very round with these wired lugs. And that's something you'd typically expect with a more vintage or retro piece. Not necessarily something you'd expect with this particular type of bracelet, which is very industrial, very modern. Along the same lines, the bracelet is also very straight and very angular, compared to the watch head, which is so circular there isn't even a right angle on it. Yet at the same time, I think the all-brushed finish of the case, as well as its larger size, help tie everything all together. And in some ways, it does give the watch a bit of a steampunk feel, which often clashes vintage and modern elements. Whether that was intentional, I have no idea, but that is how it's wound up. Now, on the rear we have an exhibition case back, which is complete with all the particulars and a smaller crystal, letting you just see a glimpse of the custom rotor and the NH34 movement. Back to the front and over at the right, you have a typical signed screw-down crown, where this one's not too big and not too small, just the right size to easily get a grip and use. And just in case you're newer to watches and you're not sure what a GMT hand is or how to use it, it's pretty simple. Basically, it's a fourth hand that runs on a 24-hour scale, and it's one you can adjust independently. To do that, it's pretty simple. Just pop the crown out to the first position and rotate the crown upwards to advance the GMT hand in 1 hour increments. If you see the date change instead, just rotate the other direction. This allows you to track a second time zone independently from the hour hand. Typically, you leave the regular hour hand adjusted to your home time, and then you use the GMT hand to keep track of another location, or when you're traveling, you set it to wherever you're at. And that way you can keep track of where you're at, as well as what's going on back home. And this is what a lot of people would refer to as a collar style GMT. There's another one called a Traveler's GMT, sometimes a True GMT, but that's a different story. Moving on to the dial. Now, as typical with Aragon, there are a few different colorways, but the one they sent me is this pimpin' purple sunburst. Perfect for Samuel L. Jackson, or maybe if you're doing a Joker cosplay. Seriously though, I really wasn't sure what to think about this color when I first saw it. It's really not me, but it has grown on me over time. It's unique, and it's not like anything else I have. so maybe it's perfect for those times you want something completely different. The overall dial design is fairly standard and straightforward. You have applied square metallic indices with white luminous paint, along with white minute markers filling the gaps in between. There's also a raised chapter ring, also in purple, and that one has 24-hour indicators for the GMT. Over at the right, you have a frame date at the 3. My personal preference is to always have the date down at the 6, as I think that really helps with the flow and symmetry, but a 3 o'clock date is fairly standard, as is the text on the dial. There's some branding at the top in a metallic that matches the indices, along with some info at the bottom in a rather small font, and that small block of text does seem to blend into the purple background. Then, on top of everything, we have a very interesting handset. The hour and minute hand are basically lance-shaped, with a small cutout in the back, giving them a really cool, aggressive, and modern edge, matching the watch. And I do like the slight angled edge to them, as it helps to catch the light in a similar way to the indices. So overall, good stuff here. But the GMT hand is one thing I'm not particularly sold on. The black base and red hand do stand out against the purple, yet the red tip perhaps clashes and stands out too much. And since this is a GMT, the hands are a little taller than a regular three-hander. And I think that's obvious when you're looking down at it, as there is a bit more depth with the design. Although I do wish that the indices were a little taller to match the hand height, because as they are now, they do look a little short in comparison. And with this particular purple dial, contrast isn't necessarily the best, but it is still sufficient enough. However, if you do want to maximize legibility over, say, some style, then the black or blue colorway may be the better choice. If not, maybe a little bit more boring choice. As for the Lume, well, the Lume needs improvement, and that is one common complaint I have against Aragon. First off, the GMT hand doesn't have any Lume, but the bigger issue is that what Lume is here doesn't last very long. In my comparison test, it's basically Vostok levels of Lume. And for the price, that is potentially excusable, but I'd still prefer more. Movement-wise, as I said before, this is using a Seiko NH34 automatic GMT movement. It is a newer movement, so there's not a huge track record with it, but it is based on the tried and true NH35A, and as such, it should be a good workhorse. Let's move on to the bracelet, which is one of the most interesting aspects of the Millipede Evo. I guess you'd call this a tank tread or bike chain type bracelet. It's definitely different and unique, and because of the wired lugs, there are flat end links, so you could potentially use this with another watch as well. The bracelet has these solid, fully articulating chain links, and all of that does end with a milled clasp with 3 micro adjusts. It's one of the coolest bracelets I've seen on a watch with this whole modern industrial vibe to it, but at the same time, I can tell you there are a lot of people who think it's just too much. It's just too weird for them. But for others, I think you'll love it just for how different it is. Although, let me warn you right now, while this is cool, it is also a pain to size, as you need a hex head wrench on both sides, one to hold and one to unscrew the link. It's one of those bracelets where you almost need a third hand just to do it. So if you get it, just have some patience and take your time while sizing it. Now on the wrist, I do wish that there was some taper to it, but even without, it is reasonably comfortable on my 7¼ inch wrist. And a lot of that is just thanks to the fully articulating links, as it easily conforms to the natural curvature. It's also fairly airy and breathable, which is a really weird thing to say about a bracelet, but it's something I noticed and that's the best way to describe it. So on a hot summer day, you might not be quite as sweaty. Looking straight down, I do see a little bit of overhang, but the way the wire lugs come down and the straight end link just fully rotates around it, I think that does help minimize that effect. And overall, I think it does wear true to that 44mm size. If there's any negative to this bracelet, it's gonna be if you're someone who's used to smaller and lighter watches, then after a full day, I think you're gonna notice the weight more than any size issues. In terms of value, these are currently going for $250 on Aragon's site. And I'll throw up some other NH34 based GMTs just for comparison. But at this price, I think this is easily one of the best deals out there for someone who wants an original automatic GMT. There are some cheaper watches that use it on AliExpress, as you might expect. But if you are talking about an original design, then I think this is the lowest I've seen. So, a lot of value here. Bottom line, the Millipede Evo GMT has a fairly simple, straightforward dial design, and that results in a very functional GMT. But it's one that's then paired with this really vibrant purple dial, as well as a very unique case and bracelet combination, as well as a pretty low price. And when you add all of that up, it makes it a fantastic choice for someone who's interested in getting a budget GMT. Or maybe just for someone who's interested in something pretty unusual. The only potential trick here is going to be that size and weight, and perhaps that was obvious a while ago. So if you're someone that prefers 42mm and under, you're probably not going to be comfortable with this one. But if you like something a little larger, like say Seiko Samurai sizes, you should be okay with this one. Anyway, that's all I got for you. As usual, let me know what you think about this one down below. And if there's another GMT coming out that's caught your eye, let me know that as well. And as always, if you enjoyed the video, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. It really does help the channel. I'm Shane, this is Relative Time, and I'll see you next time.